Most people believe elections are decided by votes, by citizens lining up at polling stations, marking a box, and trusting that the system will translate those choices into power. We treat elections as the ultimate symbol of democracy, the one mechanism where ordinary people can supposedly change the direction of their nation. But what if that entire belief rests on a comforting illusion? What if the real battle for power happens long before a single vote is cast, and far away from polling stations, buried in networks of money, influence, disinformation, foreign interests, and dark systems that operate behind the scenes? What if elections, at their core, are not contests of ideas, but if hidden financial architectures built to tilt the playing field long before the public even shows up? This story begins long before the ballot box. Modern elections are expensive, complicated, and deeply vulnerable, and those vulnerabilities are not accidental. They evolve from decades of political bargaining, corporate influence, and the quiet rise of financial mechanisms that most voters never hear about. The corruption behind elections isn't always a suitcase of cash or a rigged voting machine. Sometimes it's the legal loophole that allows billionaires to spend unlimited money. Sometimes it's the intelligence agency that quietly leaks information at the perfect moment. Sometimes it's the foreign state that uses digital black markets to manipulate narratives. And sometimes it's the political party that rewrites the rules in its favor, years before anyone noticed. To understand how deep this goes, we need to travel far back, not to modern democracies, but to ancient empires. Because elections didn't start as a noble attempt at equality. They started as a way for elites to manage rivalry. In ancient Rome, elections were public spectacles, controlled by wealthy families who used patronage networks to secure votes. Candidates funded games, festivals, and public feasts, essentially buying loyalty. Roman writers openly described elections as auctions. When the empire fell, the idea didn't disappear. It simply changed form. By the time medieval kingdoms emerged, kings didn't run for office, but the nobles who influenced them did. Church officials were elected, but those elections were routinely manipulated through bribery, inheritance, or pressure from monarchs. Every era reinvented the process, but one thing remained constant. Elections were always shaped by power outside the ballot box. Fast forward to the 20th century. Nations embraced mass democracy, but they also industrialized corruption. Once television arrived, elections became marketing battles. Political campaigns hired advertising executives, behavioral psychologists, and corporate strategists. Money became ammunition, and whoever controlled the most could shape public perception. But here's the twist. As electoral rules grew more complex, so did the ways to cheat them. Dark money groups, offshore donors, PACs, super PACs, and shell companies became the new battlefield. And this wasn't illegal. Most of it was designed to be technically legal. The rise of global finance created a new phenomenon: political offshore networks. Wealthy individuals and political elites used tax havens to hide assets, move money discreetly, and influence political outcomes across borders. The Panama Papers and Pandora Papers exposed thousands of politicians who secretly stored wealth in offshore accounts. Many of those networks are still operating today, influencing elections quietly and invisibly. But financial influence is only one side of the story. The 21st century introduced something far more powerful: algorithmic manipulation. Social media transformed elections into information wars. Disinformation factories emerged in Russia, Eastern Europe, Southeast Asia, Africa, and the West. Troll farms built fake movements. Bot armies shaped public opinion. Artificial intelligence created fake personas. In many countries, political parties themselves funded disinformation campaigns to destroy opponents. The battlefield of elections moved online, and the truth became optional. And behind all of this lies a disturbing reality. Even when corruption is exposed, it rarely stops the system. After the 2016 US election, governments around the world promised reforms. But digital propaganda is now more sophisticated than ever. After the bribery scandals in Latin America, new political figures vowed transparency, but many used the same schemes once in power. After billions of illegal money flows were uncovered in Europe and Asia, regulations tightened, but the money found new routes. The breaking point in this story arrives when corruption becomes so normalized that voters no longer trust the process. This is where elections begin to collapse from within. If people believe outcomes are predetermined, manipulated, or bought, democracy loses legitimacy. And once legitimacy is gone, elections stop functioning as peaceful power transitions. They become catalysts for unrest. This has already happened repeatedly around the world, from Eastern Europe to South America, from Africa to South Asia, from the Middle East to North America. But the most dangerous corruption doesn't happen on election day. It happens in the years leading up to it. Politicians redraw electoral maps. They control census results. They appoint loyal judges. They change funding rules. They influence media laws. They shape the education system. They weaponize scandals. They promise jobs, contracts, subsidies, or protection in exchange for support. This is not accidental. It is systematic. And here's the part most people never hear. Major criminal organizations also influence elections. Cartels fund candidates who promise weaker enforcement. Gangs mobilize communities to vote a certain way. Smuggling networks create alliances with politicians who profit from illicit markets. Corrupt officials protect these networks in exchange for campaign financing. In many countries, the line between organized crime and political power is almost invisible. Elections become business deals, investments that promise profitable returns. Foreign governments also play a hidden role. Some provide direct funding. Others manipulate supply chains to create artificial economic crises before an election. Others use cyber operations to leak damaging information at strategic moments. Some use humanitarian aid as political pressure, and some deploy intelligence services to shape outcomes silently. This global web of corruption has created a modern paradox. Elections appear more transparent than ever, but manipulation is easier, cheaper, and more efficient than at any time in history. Voting machines can be secure, but voters can be influenced long before they reach them. Ballots can be counted honestly, but the system that determines who gets to be on the ballot may be rigged. Campaign finance laws can be strict, but offshore money can bypass them instantly. Media can be independent, but algorithms decide what the public sees. The fallout from these manipulations is enormous. Corruption inflates budgets, weakens governments, empowers criminals, and destabilizes entire regions. Nations lose trust in institutions. Economies suffer. Divisions grow. And the worst part, even when corruption is exposed, the damage remains. Elections feel increasingly theatrical, symbolic rituals, hiding deeper battles for control. Governments attempt fixes. New transparency rules, campaign finance limits, digital monitoring, anti-corruption agencies. But these solutions fail for one simple reason. The people who create the rules are the same people who benefit from the loopholes. Reform becomes performative, a way to appear responsible while changing nothing. The shadows simply move. Today, election corruption is no longer just a national issue. It is a global industry. Consultants specialize in manipulation strategies. Intelligence agencies study psychological warfare. Tech companies sell data to political clients. Financial networks quietly push money into campaigns, and digital black markets host illegal operations that shape public perception worldwide. Modern parallels are everywhere. In Africa, political elites use offshore accounts to hide billions, while promising transparency. In Europe, foreign influence networks quietly fund parties on both the far left and far right. In Asia, business tycoons control entire party systems. In Latin America, narcopolitics merges government with organized crime. In the Middle East, powerful states influence the political landscape of weaker neighbors. And in North America, billionaires shape elections in ways unimaginable to ordinary citizens. The repeating pattern is unmistakable. Where money flows in the shadows, elections follow. And where elections are corrupted, nations drift toward instability. Slowly at first, then suddenly. 3 takeaways become clear. First, election corruption is not a side effect of politics. It is politics. It is built into the system through financial networks, digital manipulation, and institutional control. Second, corruption does not always look like fraud. Sometimes it looks like legality, loopholes, offshore financing, algorithmic pressure, selective enforcement. Third, defending democracy requires more than voting. It requires exposing the hidden forces that shape outcomes long before ballots exist. And so the final question remains. If elections are increasingly shaped by hidden networks of money, influence, and manipulation, what does democracy mean anymore? Is it still power of the people? Or has it quietly become a stage, while the real decisions are made far from public view? This is the dark economy. If you want to understand the hidden financial and geopolitical forces shaping global power, subscribe, because the story only gets deeper from here.